Thank you so much to the gentleman from California. It was wonderful to have you out in Seattle exploring our maritime sector. We're very proud of the maritime industry in the state of Washington and in my district, the District of Washington State. And, you know, sometimes people know about us for Boeing airplanes, but they really should know about us for our natural deepwater port and all of the maritime that we have there. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, since Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico last month, residents have been without power. Many of them have not had access to relief supplies, including food and water. Many have lost their lives. It has been heartbreaking to watch. And we all stand united in pushing this administration to do everything possible to ensure that the people of Puerto Rico have access to relief supplies and that the administration is doing everything it can to assist and rebuild. These are American citizens, and we have an obligation to do everything we can to help after this devastating hurricane. But the reason I'm here today is to join my colleague, the gentleman from California, because in the wake of Hurricane Maria, we did see a false narrative spreading through the media and social channels about the Jones Act, and it caused us to reflect on the fact that perhaps not everybody knows the history of the Jones Act, not everybody understands exactly what it does and how it supports so strongly American jobs and really that benefits so many of us. There are people who have who thought that perhaps the Jones Act was to blame for the fact that supplies were not making it out of the docks and into Puerto Rico. And so, very grateful to the gentleman from California and Republican colleague across the aisle, Representative Hunter, for holding an informal hearing on this very topic and inviting in shipbuilders, shipping companies, as well as the maritime labor industry to tell us a little bit about what was happening in Puerto Rico. And so this is an opportunity really for us to talk about what the Jones Act means, because when you're talking about Make It in America, when you're talking about better wages, better jobs, and a better deal for the American public, then the Jones Act in many ways is the epitome of exactly that. So the Jones Act has been in effect for nearly 100 years and inspired by cabotage laws that were in place since the first session of Congress in 1789. And the law requires that when goods are shipped via water between 2 points in the United States, they must be shipped on U.S.-made vessels that are owned and operated by Americans. And so this is where the critical industry comes in. In terms of Puerto Rico, the Jones Act is not the reason that the distribution of relief supplies has been slow to move in Puerto Rico. In fact, reports are that thousands of containers containing fuel, emergency housing, food, water, and other essentials are trapped at the port of San Juan. To date, at least 11,300 containers with millions of pounds of relief supplies have been delivered. To put this in perspective, just one such state-of-the-art container ship arrived in Puerto Rico just 3 days after Hurricane Maria made landfall, carrying more than 35 million pounds of cargo, the equivalent of about 1,900 cargo planes. And you can see here on the chart that the Jones Act current capacity is 22,000 TEUs with a maximum carrying capacity of 1.079 billion pounds. So just imagine that the additional surge capacity as of now is 5,430 TEUs with a max carrying capacity of 258 million pounds. So the issue has not been that ships are not we actually are, our American ships are delivering supplies, but unfortunately because of the infrastructure, the lack of infrastructure, the destruction to the roads, and the issues around refrigeration, across the island, unfortunately, warehouses have been destroyed. There's nowhere to store those products. and there's no refrigeration. And so what we're seeing is the capacity at the docks continuing to increase. So over the next 2 weeks alone, Jones Act vessels will deliver more than 9,000 containers to Puerto Rico, including at least 3,300 FEMA loads full of relief cargo. So despite these volumes, the residents of Puerto Rico are suffering, not because ships aren't being able to deliver there, but because of the lack of infrastructure I mentioned, lack of refrigeration, all of those things. So currently, the point that's very important, I think, for everybody to understand is that American-flagged ships have the capacity to meet Puerto Rico's relief cargo needs, and the emphasis needs to be on moving cargo from the port of San Juan into the island and focusing on rebuilding the infrastructure that has suffered because of this devastating hurricane. Mr. Speaker, some have called for an outright repeal of the Jones Act despite these facts. Why should members of Congress on both sides of the aisle support the Jones Act? Because it is incredibly important to our country's economy and to the maritime industry, which supports nearly 500,000 jobs and is responsible for over $92 billion in gross economic output each year. So in my home state of Washington, which ranks 6th in the country for Jones Act jobs, this law supports over 16,000 jobs and helps generate approximately $1.1 billion in labor income. More than 19 million tons of cargo originate from my home state of Washington every year, and the state imports more than 28 million tons annually. Without these jobs, our economy would suffer tremendously. And in my district, Washington's 7th District, the Jones Act directly supports nearly 2,000 jobs, indirectly supports more than 6,500 related jobs. And to be clear, everywhere in the country where we have Jones Act jobs, they are better jobs, better wages, and a better future for our Americans across the country. Shipyard jobs pay incredibly well. They earn workers about 45% more than the national average for private sector jobs. And this is an area, as we saw in the hearing that you had, that this is an area where business and maritime labor, our merchant marines, are proud to work together to make sure that we provide for the national security of our country through the Jones Act, and also that we provide these deep investments in good paying union jobs. So, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that we have to invest in Puerto Rico by providing comprehensive relief, including water and food and housing and medical care, and we have to do everything we can to rebuild the infrastructure. But at the same time, we must make sure that we continue bipartisan support for this bedrock maritime law. Thank you, to the gentleman from California, and I yield back.